Welcome to the webinar. Please stand by. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to another AMA with T-Hub. We're very happy to have Sashi Reddi today with us. He is a very successful entrepreneur and inspiration to a lot of us here. He's also a T-Hub board member and has been an active investor and an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. So we are very much looking forward to all your thoughts and your inputs for our startup, sir. So can I invite Ravi to kick off with a brief introduction?
Great. Yeah. So thank you very much, Vinita. Shashi, thank you very much for joining us. This is early morning for you. So you made the effort to join us over a cup of coffee while we are enjoying wine here in India. So thank you very much for doing this. As a lot of you know, Shashi has been very active in the Hyderabad ecosystem, has been a very successful entrepreneur, a role model to several of us who are looking to build successful startups here in the Hyderabad and Indian ecosystems. So he's been also guiding us at T-Hub as a board member and as an advisor. He continues to be very involved, even though he lives several time zones away. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about T-Hub and give you a sense of what T-Hub is, because T-Hub seems to be so many things for so many people. It's like blind men touching different parts of the elephant and describing it as something else. So similar to that, I think I've heard several descriptions of T-Hub. So I just wanted to give you a sense of what we think of T-Hub and what we are looking to do going forward as a vision. At the same time, also wanted to give you a sense of the kind of webinar series that we are doing right now. Where are we in that whole process? How does it work? And so on and so forth. Just a second. I had to mute this phone. Hang on. Okay, so let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
Ravi, we can see.
All right. So T-Hub has been operational since 2015, and we've been doing multiple things with startups. But at the same time, we have also begun to evolve into being an enabler and an empowerer of the innovation ecosystem here in Telangana. So we work with corporations, we work with investors, we work with academia, we work with the government, and these are all different constituencies that are part of the ecosystem, which ultimately helps in benefiting the startups who get the benefit through the corporations wanting to collaborate with startups a lot more, wanting to go down their innovation journey in a much larger way, academia generating the kind of research that is necessary to solve some of the issues that are there that startups are looking to tackle, and being a partner with the startups to make that happen. Government not only being the policy makers to help create that right ecosystem, but at the same time also being a huge procurer of the innovations that are coming out of startups. So for all these reasons, it's very apparent that you can't just help the startups become better and better. After a while, they hit a wall and say, okay, what else can we do? Because the demand has to be also, commensurately, increasing in the ecosystem for them to continue to get better and better at it. And obviously, investors play an integral role in helping these startups really go capture that huge window of opportunity that they're going after as the markets open up and provide these opportunities to the startups. So T-Hub has a three-pronged strategy. First prong for us is the startup innovation, as in we work with startups all the way from the beginning of the journey, all the way to the time that they become unicorns or go IPO or whatever. So that's the whole vision of us being integral to their journey as they go through the entire thing. Of course, we start a little later, which is like, they have to have 50 lakhs of minimum, revenue for us to be able to bring them into our first program, which is the incubation program. So incubation has a whole family of programs. There is Lab 32, there is T-Angel, and so on and so forth. So this is at the very early stage, pre-seed. Acceleration is around Series A, and post-Series A is scaling and all the other programs that we have at T-Hub. So we are looking to be, part of the startup ecosystem, helping them through this. But we start, at an early time, and then we continue to be there in their journey as we go along. So because of the digital platforms that we have created, we can actually work with startups even if they have the bulk of their people sitting outside, and we bring them in every once in a while whenever we have a workshop or a seminar. But the connectivity, the relationship continues to thrive regardless of where they are. Some of them move to the valley, but they continue to work with us as they are making progress through their journeys. The second one is corporate innovation, and this is a very, very important piece because you would have heard about a lot of incubators, accelerators, and most of these people are getting startups to become better and better. But we also feel that it's equally important or even more important to open up the demand for the startups. The more mindset that we create among the corporations, among the industry leaders to, partner with startups, the more there is demand. If we are able to identify some problem statements, we are identify certain innovation paths for the corporations to go in a certain way very, very quickly, while they continue to be bringing in the domain expertise of that industry. We are also thinking that the peripheral pieces, say data analysis, data visualization, blockchain, AI, ML, which they don't need to necessarily invest in or create a separate team altogether. A lot of these kinds of things can easily come from a whole bunch of startups that are doing some absolutely wonderful work from India, and we've become an integral part of the corporate's innovation journey. And that's the clout that we can bring and have those conversations on behalf of the startups, and therefore bring in that demand for the startups. At the same time, we do the same with the governments. The governments also, are in the process of thinking, okay, what else can we do in terms of e-governance? What else can we do in terms of, let's say, addressing agriculture and the kind of demands that we have there, and so on and so forth. So we try and introduce the appropriate startups to them so that they can also start incorporating them into their plans. And then finally, we have a large charter of building an ecosystem, which we are very, very proud of in Telangana. And we feel that this is a model ecosystem that we can replicate in other states across India and also in other countries across the world. So this is where we do a lot of capacity building, we do a lot of certification, we do a lot of international programs so that the best of the startups from India can actually get access to the global markets. And some of the best startups in the global markets who want to tap into the large economy of India, they can actually come through T-Hub and get access to this. So this is the kind of work that we do, which is quite multifaceted, but also required, because if you really want to build an ecosystem, you can't do one and not the other. And so this is a very important piece of work that we do, and each one of us is on a missionary zeal to make this thing happen. And it's a small team, but we have accomplished quite a bit in a small amount of time. So we think of ourselves as startups, and because startups have to be nimble, have to be constantly evolving so that it can serve the um, the stakeholders. We also felt that given the COVID pandemic around us, a lot of things that were normal business as usual for us, all that kind of just went away one day. So we are not only responding to it so that we continue to survive and thrive, but we also are taking the responsibility of making sure that the entire startup ecosystem continues to survive and thrive. So this is the reason we do the webinars, to be in constant support of all our startups. The kind of webinars that we do are of four types. One is handling a hard time. This is what we did a lot of in the beginning of the pandemic. So that was around end of March, early April. We did a lot of handling a hard time, helping people figure out personal safety issues, emerging practices for handling the COVID, and concerns about employees and customers working from home and stuff like that. The next set of webinars that we did was about how do you take the efficiencies that a lot of corporations have evolved and actually fine-tune and run their businesses very well. Now, there is a natural tendency for us to say, that's what a big company does, but we are small and we will be efficient without all that processes and so on and so forth. But there are certain elements of that we should continue to look at, because when we are working from home, we don't meet each other as often. We're working on the same project, but we are not able to figure out exactly whatever I'm supposed to finish, the other person has to pick up. Is that all happening in a good way, and so on and so forth. So how do you really create those kinds of processes and monitor the progress that you're making so that we are not becoming inefficient or maybe jeopardize the viability of a startup because of the fact that we are not following some solutions that have already been perfected over years that we cover through business as usual. Plan B, C, whatever, is going back to the drawing board and figuring out exactly how you would like to rethink of what you can do, because you already have a lot of the technology built. You have a great understanding of the market. So is it possible that not just do you have to survive, but you actually have a completely new market opportunity that is opening up to you? How do you take advantage of that? So that's the kind of discussion that we have. And then the AMAs that we are doing today, that we'll continue to do. Most of the AMAs that I'm doing are with VCs, not just because it is a funding discussion, but like Sashi, for example, they're all past entrepreneurs. They've seen several of these crises come and go, and they are still around to tell the tale. So obviously, to tell you that this is also going to pass, and also bring that perspective as to how we can take advantage of these kinds of opportunities, and really do something much more for your startup than what you probably would have been paralyzed into thinking otherwise. And starting with the next one, we're actually also going a little deeper and looking at some very important funding kind of discussions, where we will be able to take a look at your business plan, your finances, help you with making it more efficient, helping you with understanding what are the different sources of funding. Sashi, just before this, was telling me that the US government has been, sending checks to some of their startups to help them with the money. We haven't seen that happening in India, but there are other sources of money that we would like to bring to your attention to see how we can make that happen. So we've been at this now almost for 8-9 weeks now. Here are some sessions so far on the business unusual side. Plan B, here are some sessions that we've done so far. We have also done a lot of AMAs, and we continue to build on this as we go along. And the next week, next Friday, we will have one of my friends and also very active leader in the ecosystem in India, Vinod Kenny from Artha Ventures, who's going to join us. And then there's another one planned. So Vinod is not only going to give you his perspective on the ecosystem, but he's also going to go deeper into understanding how to make your financial situation much stronger and how to get money from different sources to kind of build your new growth trajectory from here on out. So that's where we are. We rely a lot on our partners to work with us, and we help them as much as we can ourselves. So we just want to make sure that it's not just our startups in T-Hub, but we're also able to help the startups under the aegis of these organizations also to thrive as they do for us as well. So this is where we are for today. And, okay. So this is, So this is the point at which I hand it off to Shashi with him giving his opening remarks, and then we'll get into the Q&A part of it. So thank you very much. You, Shashi.
Okay, so I see that I've been given control. So thanks, Ravi, for a fantastic presentation. Let me just share my screen. Before I get started, I should say that the T-Hub is probably the best shot that Hyderabad has of being like a key player in the startup ecosystem. And I think the way that you presented the mission is really good. The way to think of like a startup innovation, like corporate innovation, and then like the ecosystem, all three coming together. I think that's like really nice way of thinking about it. So Ravi asked me to pick a topic. I'm just going to move some of these windows out of the way. So I thought, let me talk about something that I wrote about quite recently. Guys, just give me 1 second, since I'm more like a Zoom guy, so I just want to make sure that... Okay. Yeah, so I thought I'll talk about something that I wrote on this topic recently, called B2C to B2B, and I'll explain all of this later on. But so I think, if you were to step back and look at, okay, what do Indian SaaS companies have to do to be successful, right? I think that's something that's been really bothering a lot of us for years. And if you look at, what's happening in India, right? So after like a lot of struggle, we've been able to get some of our the larger Indian corporates to start to move to the cloud. And I think this is now starting to happen. Like in the last few years, we are seeing more and more large companies all starting to move to the cloud, which is a big deal. So that's great. So that's been a huge step, and this starts to open the door for SaaS companies to then go off and like sell them their offerings, right? So I think that's a big step. But even in spite of the move to the cloud, even after that, there's still like a lot of issues with being successful in India for a SaaS company. And I thought I'll just like try to capture some of that here. So Indian customers expect a lot of face-to-face interaction. So, we've got a couple of startups where, you might be selling to someone who's probably, say, like 3 levels down from like a C-level person at a large bank or a large company. And he would expect the CEO to come and meet him face-to-face for a discussion. And then it's not just one meeting, but there'll be 2-3 meetings. And for everyone, if the CEO doesn't show up, it's, like a sign that you're not showing enough respect or whatever. So there's a lot of face-to-face interaction expected during the sales process. But even after you win the business, there is this feeling that, okay, you need to send your people to train my people on how to use the software. So there's this whole, there might be like some deployment for like really large companies to sort of make sure that you upload all the user stuff or integrate with something else there. But otherwise, even things that should be something that you can use on your own, people expect for you to organize training sessions, and then of course tech support's always face-to-face type discussions. And then after all of this work gets done, there's always this notion of the payment where still you have to go and actually collect the payment. It's not something that you can automatically expect it to get to your bank account. So there's a lot of cost and like friction involved in selling SaaS to Indian corporates, right? So this is something that I'm sure that some of you have already seen and experienced. And then on the flip side, which is on the top line side, Indian customers are very price sensitive, which of course we've all known. But what happens is that if you go in as a SaaS player to someone and say that, okay, this is my cost per, this is like the MRR, this is what I expect you to pay me per month. Typically, we see that conversation get shifted to saying that, okay, you know what, I'll pay you 6 to 9 months worth of your of like the monthly revenue, and you give it to me as a one-time perpetual license. That's where the conversation almost always seems to go. And so it's almost like a bit scary for like a SaaS company to go to the customer meeting and talk about, well, MRR, because it inevitably becomes some sort of like a discussion on the perpetual license. Now, that is not true across the board, of course. So as I don't want to make the seem as if everybody will do this, but the point being that except for maybe some of the like really well-funded startups from the last 5-8 years were actually like really used to thinking like this, and all of that is fine. But then if you go to like the traditional Indian corporate, this conversation starts to become like a discussion about the perpetual license. Now, some of this is slowly changing, and we'll get into that. And the other issue here is that typically the Indian customer expects to pay 1/4 or 1/5 of what that service would cost in the US. So, we've got some companies which are in talks to sell like some license for 100 rupees per user per month, say. But at the same time, when they talk to a customer in the US, they expect a minimum of $5 per user per month. So that is the sort of the difference in the pricing. So the whole SaaS model, what made some of these companies so valuable is that both of these factors have to work, right? So one is you have to make enough money at the top, and your cost is supposed to be so low that you can actually make this a very profitable, like really sustainable long-term model where people are just paying you every month. There's no interaction required, and that's what makes SaaS so attractive. But in the Indian context, this has been the scenario, and there's been a challenge. That's the reason why, if you think about it, we've not had a lot of Indian SaaS success stories, right? So what this has, okay, so let's talk about like COVID, right? So I love COVID. I think it's a huge, huge plus for Indian SaaS companies, as well as for like other reasons. But of course, there's a huge health thing. So please don't mistake this to mean that I'm all for disease. But the COVID opportunity now suddenly changes some of the dynamics here, because now the customer, hopefully, going forward, will not expect the face-to-face visits, and if so, it might be just one to just like really close the deal. But otherwise, we are thinking that like a lot of this interaction now will be done through calls like this, right? So that changes the cost equation dramatically. But the pricing equation still remains the same, in the sense that that we will still have like a lot of price sensitivity. But the good news within this context is that actually what's been happening even like prior to COVID in the last 2-3 years, as I'm sure you guys know this much better than I do, which is there's anyway been a move towards the digitization aspect of it in the last 3-4 years, right? We've seen that move happening anyways. So the sales cycle was actually anyway starting to improve, but now with COVID, there's a bit more of like an urgency to sort of move to digitization faster. And the other change that I'm seeing is that instead of this being seen as, okay, well, I just need those people in my company to have access to your software. Now there's a feeling that, what, I need to have access across the company or across like a much larger group of people. So basically, it's like a faster sales cycle and the potential for like a slightly bigger ticket item when you sell. So, but still, the sensitivity to price still remains, but at least now you're talking about like a much larger number of users, hopefully. So in that sense, if you take these two factors together, then the SaaS economics are starting to make a little bit more sense post-COVID. But given the challenges faced by Indian SaaS companies within India, so there's been this talk of, okay, let's find a way to sell in the US, right? That's been the typical next step. And the way that we've thought about this is, and this has been almost across the board, this has become almost like the wisdom is to first prove the model of design your software with this whole notion that it's out there and it's completely self-service. And if this is how you're approaching it with a phenomenal UX, clearly stated pricing, everything is self-service, there's no training required, then why do you need a sales team? What you need is a phenomenal marketing team. And you've got to have someone who understands how to do the digital marketing in the most effective way. And a key part of marketing, of course, it's not possible for everybody, but you have to the extent you can, try to build in some of the virality into your product, some way by which if I were to try out your software, force me in some way to engage with your software with someone else. And it might be something that's obvious based on the domain that you're in some cases not obvious. And maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but it doesn't really matter because you need to find a way to get other people engaged. So as you get people to use your software, you're also expanding the people that are using it. So these are my thoughts as to how, after 4 or 5 years of this try it out in India first type of model, maybe we need to sort of try something new to see if we can get Indian SaaS to finally break out. And I think this is the perfect time to do it because a lot of these factors that you're talking about play right into the remote economy where, you just don't expect to meet people and have these long conversations and so on and so forth. You expect things to sort of be self-evident. So I thought I'll put like a nice catchy name to it. So I'm actually calling this as B2C to B2B, meaning that you start with a B2C mindset when you build your enterprise app, but you're selling to B2B. So that's, so Ravi, you asked for like few remarks on a topic. So I thought I will talk about.
This is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Especially turning it on its head, is something that's not very intuitive because everybody wants to start taking it a little easy, make some baby steps, and then get to where you need to get to. So this is very good. I'm sure this is also not just a knee-jerk reaction. It's something that you have seen over and over again, and therefore it's a deliberated one. So I'll park that for a while because I'm sure there will be a lot of questions for you regarding your experiences in this regard. I'll just ask you a couple of questions. One, just because of your experiences with the Hyderabad ecosystem, you've been there, you've been built your company there, you've been a role model to a lot of our entrepreneurs. So what do you see is changing in the ecosystem? Maybe you can just dwell on that, and also just the way you have a vantage point of the B2B SaaS. What is your vantage point, especially since sitting so far away? Maybe an objective viewpoint of Hyderabad, and what can we be doing differently or better? One, because of what all you've seen over time, but also because of this. The pandemic is also giving us an opportunity to hit the reset button in several ways. What ways can we come out of the gate and do things in a different way?
Okay, Ravi. So since you asked for the objective view, you may not like my answer. Objectively, I think that in the minds of the people outside India, I think we'll always see Bangalore as being number one in the startup ecosystem. I think that's sort of now ingrained in people's minds. In fact, that's part of the common view of both the VCs and other entrepreneurs here in the US. But that said, there's been some changes that are happening due to COVID, and you must have seen these stories also, in the Bay Area, where some of the companies are telling their employees that they can work from anywhere going forward, not just after the lockdown, but in general, they can go and work from anywhere. And even the VCs are trying to figure out the model because the entire notion of Silicon Valley is the fact that your location really matters, right? So that's why you have all the VCs on one road. in the valley, which is where all the money.
10-mile radius where they would invest in earlier. Now, I guess it's...
In fact, my first company when I started, I was asked to move to San Francisco. So I was actually talking to Kleiner Perkins, and we are being looked at for funding in my first company. And yeah, you're exactly right. If you're not within the 10-mile radius, you're not worth talking to. So that has been the Silicon Valley way. And in some sense, what applies there to Silicon Valley and this notion that maybe the location may not really matter as much, and all the VCs are also thinking about what this means for them. The same thing, I think, could open a door to what happens in India with regard to Bangalore and Hyderabad. So I think maybe there could be a shift in terms of that there's an opportunity now for Hyderabad to come forward. And I think some of the steps that you outlined as T-Hub, I think that's a very key player to make sure that we can help the entire Hyderabad ecosystem navigate that the transition. But I think it could really be an opportunity for Hyderabad to finally break out, I think.
Oh, that's great news. I just wanted to ask a little bit more specific question to the portfolio companies of yours, Sashi. I'm sure you're spending quite a bit of time in helping them get through this whole process. This time when a lot of things are changing around them. So just wanted to see what are the kinds of issues you're finding them come up to you with. Is there a certain pattern or set of things that you see, and what are the kinds of interventions are you offering them to help them through this process?
Yeah, so after COVID, we of course have a portfolio of about 45 companies. So we've got a fairly large number of investments over the years. So for the old portfolio, we used to talk probably once a quarter. For the more recent portfolio, it was once a month, and that was a general pace at which we were working. And of course, some of the companies where there were things happening that we needed to really engage on, we were talking once a week to sort of help them get off the ground. But during COVID, we've changed all of that to where every company that we have significant stake in, we started to talk to everybody once a week. So this was to make sure that we really understood what was the cash situation, what could be immediate opportunities that they could try to monetize, and so on and so forth. So now that some of the initial shock has sort of really died down, we've now shifted some of these companies to once every 2 weeks, and we expect that probably by July we'll move back to once a month for most companies, and then back to once a quarter for some of the older investments where there's a bigger board and everything else. So that's been the general change, but I would say that it really forced us to get very hands-on quickly across a whole bunch of different companies.
So what are the kind of conversations you have when you meet with them this often?
So I think in a sense, a lot of our bets were on the digital side, on the tech side. So actually this the remote economy really presented a lot of very interesting opportunities for some of these companies. It was actually a huge plus for I would say 7 or 8 of these companies. So just trying to find a way to again fully redo the business plan to sort of take advantage of the new opportunities took a lot of discussions, and that's the kind of thing that we engaged on. And of course, we had some that were really hurt from the cash flow standpoint, even though the longer term might be good, the short term, they're struggling with cash flow. So we try to help them with those discussions as well in terms of seeing who in our network who we could really pull in to help with the funding and so on. So I would say that, just to give you very high level idea, I think we've done probably about half a dozen fundings in the last few weeks. So for a couple of these, it was a slight, a down round we had to do to sort of get other people to engage with us to actually invest. With a couple of them, it was a flat round where we were the lead, we just kept the pricing intact and we just put more money in. And of course, the thing that you were mentioning earlier about support from the US government, all of our startups in the US got a check from something called as a PPP program, which is like the Payroll Protection Program, PPP program. It gives you 2 months worth of your spend from last year. So say that you take last year's average monthly spend, you get 2 times that amount for free. I mean, in the sense that like you get it as a loan, but then as long as you spend it in the right way, like the loan becomes a grant and you never have to pay it back. So that 2 months really helped a lot of our companies during the worst period when everything was shut down. At least they were able to pay the salaries and pay the rent and all of that stuff. So that was a big help as well. So it's been like a mix of trying to find ways to like increase the cash flow for these companies during this period, and also well, COVID also threw up some like really interesting opportunities. So I would say that like a couple of our companies have seriously accelerated during COVID. So it's been like a plus as well to some of the portfolio.
Great. I think I can ask you a whole lot of questions and hog your time, but I'm sure there are plenty of people who want to ask questions. So I'll turn it over to Vinuta to just help us get to the questions.
Thanks, Shashi. Thanks for your wonderful inputs, and I'm sure everybody has taken what they need from this session. If you can all take a minute to fill in a short survey about the MA as such, you can find the link in the chat button here. Kindly take a minute to do that. We'll just be on hold. And then please leave your questions in the question tab. We have a few questions. We can take those questions. You can keep asking your questions or raise your hand if in case you want to ask Shashi or Ravi directly over video and mic. Please do give us access for the mic and video when you raise your hand. I'll just take 1 minute. Maybe we can have sip on that coffee, tea or something, and then we'll be done with the survey.
So while we wait, I'll just like really point something else out to you, Ravi, which I think you'll find interesting. I don't know if you saw the Facebook announcement that, as people work from elsewhere, the salary that they get will depend upon where they're working from. I mean, in the sense that like it won't be the same salary that they earned when they're in the Bay Area. It might be like less if they were to go away, but of course it could still be like really good for the employee. So with all of this happening through the remote working, what do you think will happen with the rate paid for Indian IT workers? Because now that everybody's working remote, why would an Indian IT worker now have to be paid less than the guy who was coming to the office in the US, right? So that's one really interesting question as to whether this would mean that the actual rates for Indian IT will go up in the remote economy.
Well, first of all, I would hope that a lot of them will gravitate to Hyderabad and work out of Hyderabad. I think, great place, great environment, great set of pubs and all that. So great lifestyle. But I think, it's really disrupting the entire space where, the kind of value that we thought we were creating through having people working out of India is going to be, severely impacted. And I know that there are several people, especially in the US, who have now asked, okay, if you guys want to travel to India, we're happy to put your ticket so you can go sit from India and work from there. So it's very interesting. And I think that sometime in August, I think things will start opening up in that regard. Vinuta, are we ready for the other questions?
Yeah, we are ready with the other questions. I'm just going to start off. Jayant has been working on the survey part. So, Sashi, first question is, could you please talk?
Fill out the survey. Sorry, I was just saying we should continue to fill out the survey. It's a very important tool for us to continue to evolve the webinars and continue to provide the help that we need to serve you. So please do fill out the survey as we keep answering questions.
Yeah. So, Sashi, the first question says, could you please talk more about economics do not make sense? Does this mean gross margin, EBITDA or PAT or return on capital? Because even US SaaS companies fail on EBITDA level, while going for IPO.
No, that's absolutely true. So I actually looked at the gross margin level, meaning if you take what is the revenue minus the cost to serve, like just the COGS if you take out. So that's what I was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would you provide pointers to SaaS startups keen to launch in US or European markets? Are there any avenues that particularly help Indian startups get off ground?
Yeah, so this notion of like getting off the ground, I think we now have to think of it in terms of how does your self-service offering function, and can we get some early adoption feedback in the US? And since it's okay for us to get that feedback even from smaller companies, I think this like being able to get off the ground is so much easier. So, for example, if you look earlier, right, and we wanted to sell like some enterprise software, we had to get the validation from, say, 2-3 like really credible US customers for you to be taken seriously as, okay, now you got the validation. But with what we're talking about here, I think even if you get that feedback from like a bunch of smaller companies, and then you take that feedback and fix whatever you need to fix in terms of your interface and how it works, then you should have the confidence to start investing on your marketing to get like more people signed up. So the validation notion, I think, has changed, right? Because earlier it was 2-3 like really large, well-branded customers to give you the validation, and now it's more like get some quick feedback from the smaller companies that try it out, and then you start investing in your marketing so then the validation really comes from the number of customers that sign up to use your software. I think that's the validation. But now you don't have to depend on the big brands. You just need to use marketing to get the smaller companies to try it out, and hopefully that eventually leads to the bigger companies trying it out. I just want to clarify something. So I think what we're talking about here is not so much even small companies. It is like really individuals who are trying out your software. They could be working for a small company or a big company, but the hope is that if they're working for a big company, if like enough people within that big company try out your software, it then becomes some sort of like an enterprise purchase decision down the road. But basically, you're almost selling to specific users, and that's the way they're able to get going faster with this model.
So I think the next question kind of flows from where we left off this. It says, what is the best advice that you can share to acquire initial customers for a B2B SaaS startups? If you're saying that we should go about acquiring smaller either users or smaller companies, then what would be the best way for a startup sitting out of India to approach, or what would be the best modus operandi for that?
So I would say that challenge would be the same whether you're sitting in India or the US, right? At some level, given what we're talking about here as being a self-service type of an offering, it doesn't really matter because you're not expected to be anyway interacting with anybody to be able to sell this. So the fact that you're in India is not like a big disadvantage to you. That said, anything that you sell from wherever to like anywhere in the world, it's back to your first few customers will be people from your network who are going to probably try it out, right? So that's always going to be the case, except that post that initial like set of people that you get from your network to try it out, post that it becomes more of like a marketing issue than a sales issue. I think to some extent that's how you have to think about it. In terms of like being comfortable, being in the right places where like your potential consumers are, and so for example, like we are investors in or Hyderabad, this company called Foyer, right, which sells software to interior designers. So when they started to sell in the US, they just had a very sophisticated like a social marketing strategy where they were in places like Pinterest and other places where the very interior designers go to, and that's how you acquire customers. In fact, they've been able to do that very successfully.
So next question is about any specific trends in Indian SaaS that excite you, Shashi? Construction, HR, or anything specific?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, like I'm glad that someone asked that question, because I think when you think of SaaS, now you have to think super specific. And I think this is like a point I can't stress enough. It's fine if the total audience for what you're selling is only like 200,000 or 300,000 people in the US. It doesn't really matter. In fact, it's a plus. So, like, I still see like a lot of people are trying to do like an HR software or like a CRM or whatever. Those days have been gone for about 5-8 years now, right? It's too late for all those things. I think if in fact you can get your SaaS offering to be so specific that you're really targeting the needs of only 200,000 or 300,000 people, but those 200,000 or 300,000 people see so much of value in your software that they're willing to pay $500 per user per month or more. That is a perfect SaaS offering to do out of India, highly targeted, serving a very niche market. I think that is where you can build a killer business. I'm very, very excited about like a whole lot of companies that we're seeing that are so targeted. They could be targeted to just like all the like the drug discovery, right? There might be what a couple 100,000 of these PhDs sitting in these labs. They're only selling to them. Or this company that we saw like in Bangalore that we're very excited about, which was selling to a company called a Spoonshot, a really great company. So they're selling to just food scientists in the US. So like that. So we see like a bunch of startups that are highly targeted, and I think that's where the action is going to be.
It's very interesting. Next question.
Would that mean that they are looking at that segment, but it's a global segment? It's not like both local and niche. It's global segment, but it's a niche segment within the global market.
Yes, absolutely right, Ravi. And that segment will pay whatever you ask, because it's not just like, okay, I can just go to another CRM vendor and he's saying it's only 50 rupees, this guy saying 75 rupees. It's not like that. These people they might have to choose between maybe 2 or 3 different offerings globally. So there's like real potential for us to actually be able to win in that space.
So I'll add one more question to that, Shashi. In cases of very specific niche SaaS offerings, should the startup look at similar pricing across geographies, given that in a normal SaaS products, like you were detailing before, that the expectation of paying $5 in US as against $4.99 in India? Do you think a differential pricing would be required for a niche software, or should it be uniform pricing?
Yeah, I think it's sort of forced to go for a standard price because you're going to make the stuff public pricing. I think where you have some flexibility is when it comes to the enterprise sale, meaning that if you look at all the pricing, whether Slack or Zoom or like anyone else, right? So you have the free version, and then you got some kind of standard version and maybe like a pro version. And then they say for enterprise version, you have to call for pricing, right? That's the typical sort of place it is. So I think where your flexibility comes on the pricing comes for like the large enterprise sales. There you can do the discounting the way you need. But for the smaller items where there are like 2-3 people trying it out, I think you're best off standardizing pricing across the globe.
Next question. Jen, can we take a few questions on live?
So we have a couple.
Yeah.
So we have Preetham Bhatt, he's raised hand for 23 minutes. So Preetham, I'm giving you access to the mic. Can you hear us? And can you say something, Preetham?
Yes. Thank you. I can hear you. And thanks, T-Hub, and thanks, Shashi. Wonderful session. And I'm into enterprise SaaS logistics technology and been here around 2 years. And I've seen that pain points everyday basis, what you said about in the first slide. Couple of things I would like to add from my own experiences. The decision making is very, very long in India. And there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen when we go to enterprises and try to make the decisions. You have to make them happy. 3 to 4 departments. That is another pain point that we have seen. And another thing I'd like to add is that I'm just being a little frank here. A lot of companies which compete in the same space go to the same kind of enterprises. Most of these enterprises sometimes take a free ride on you, where they try it out. You spend a lot of time in POC. Even you prove the value, they see the benefit. Again, all the other things come into play, and finally, you might not get the deal. And that's where a lot of disappointment happens. So I like your way to flip that off and flip that on in the other way, where you look at US first and then start from that direction. But the challenges we see is that all those points are really needed, those check marks to have that product kind of ready, even for the small customers to have a POC. But to get to the POC, get to understand the product market fit, to have the required changes to at least nail the first initial customers for that level of interest is still resource intensive. And unless you have the right set of resources in terms of skill set and access to the market to get that feedback and iterations going on, it becomes really difficult to kind of embark that journey in the early cycle of the startup.
That's true, Preetham. I think that's all good points. But there's no way to cut down the pain around that first few customers. There's just no way around it. That is where I think like a lot of the friction is there, and you have to depend on a network. There's just no way around it. I think that's like the hard part for the entrepreneur. But once you're able to solve that, then I think you're on your way. But that early part, yeah, there's just no way around it. You just have to get your network motivated to try it out, or be the early adopters. That's just something that